Hi, my name is Beth, and welcome to my May Reading Journal Wrap-Up. I feel like I say this every month, but May was probably the most intense month I've had so far this year. I attended multiple birthdays, an engagement party, Mother's Day, and a wedding. I also got strep throat in May, which really didn't help with the chaos. And I've been taking my final coursework class for my master's program, and it's a 6-week course, which means that all the work is condensed down. I've taken summer courses like that before, but this one feels so much more intense than the other ones. I've found this course to be pretty challenging too, so that also doesn't help. I did so much reading in May, but very little of it counts towards my reading goal. I mostly read pieces from an anthology collection for my class, but I haven't read all the pieces, so I can't count it. I know that I haven't had the most time to read books of my own choosing since September, but I think May was the first month where I really felt like I didn't want to do any additional reading. Most of my school time is dedicated to reading, so it doesn't always feel like a hobby right now. I kind of had to force myself to read some extra things, and while that might sound upsetting, I'm not mad about it. These books ended up acting as a bit of an escape, so I'm not upset that I pushed myself to read them. I managed to read 3 books in May, but they're all on the shorter side. I did that because I just didn't have the energy to read anything longer, and also because after I talked about a psalm for the Wild Built last month, so many of you encouraged me to give the novella another try, so I dedicated an entire month to shorter reads. I don't always gravitate towards short books. I actually feel like I do the opposite and constantly read longer books, so it was nice to read outside of my regular reading habits. The quote I've chosen for May is, "Aquamarine is a wonderful color, and I won't be made to feel bad for wearing it." This is from The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, which I read in April. It's one of my favorite quotes from this book because it's so random and funny to me, and I think it captures Gansey as a character perfectly. I'm using a sticker sheet from Artimation Co. on Etsy to decorate my cover page. I've been using sticker sheets from their shop for all my monthly spreads this year, and so far I'm really liking the look of them. I'm still not the greatest at collaging, but I feel like I've made some improvements. I've also used some paper frames from IB. And now that the cover page is complete, we can get started on the book spreads. The first book I read in May was Remote Control by Nnedi Okorafor. Last month, the stationery shop Raytora sent me some of their products to use and share with all of you. Their brand is all about cute, colorful designs, and the products that I have here really capture that well. The first items are these dog tracker stickers. These would be really great in a bullet journal or an agenda to help motivate you to engage in your hobbies and get your chores done. They also sent over a sticker sheet with these teeny tiny animals that have been turned into foods and everyday items like flowers and computers. They also sent me some really cute aquatic-themed tab stickers. I've never seen this type of product before, but one of my reading journals is whale-themed, so I think I'm gonna go and add these to that journal because they would be such a perfect match. There was also a washi tape sample with a variety of different designs. There was an animal star tape, one with these cute little dogs, one with books, which is great for a reading journal, and one with the most precious otters ever. I was really inspired by the business card they included, which was a dog in space with food. And on the back, it suggests using it as a print, and so I used that as inspiration for my first book spread. Raytora has given me a discount code for their shop, so if you use my code BETH, you'll get 15% off your purchase from their store, and I'll receive a small commission. There's a link to their store in the description box below. Thank you to Raytora for sending these my way. In my last video, so many people left suggestions on sci-fi books for me to check out, which was incredibly helpful, by the way. Thank you for all of the recommendations. And a lot of you suggested some novella options for me to try. One that got suggested was Binti by Nadia Korafor, but it wasn't available at my library, so I went with this one instead. Remote Control is about a young girl named Sankofa who, as a child, witnesses a meteor shower where a green seed falls from the sky. When she touches it, she receives this surge of power, and several years later, the power is revealed to be an ability to cast green light and kill anyone in her surrounding area. It also gives her the inability to interact with any form of technology, including phones, TVs, and vehicles. Following tragedy and the realization that the seed has been stolen, Sankofa sets out to find the seed and settle her grief. The biggest complaint I've had with the shorter prose I've read so far this year is that they don't feel long enough. It's not the fairest critique to make because I understand that they're meant to be short and concise, but I've found that the pacing moves a bit too fast, or information that I think would be relative to the narrative seems left out. I did not have this issue with Remote Control. I thought we spent just enough time with all the various characters to fully grasp their relationships and relevance to the story. There was an origin story chapter, but it didn't feel out of place. It gave just enough context to Sankofa's lore and mythology, and it did a great job at setting the rest of the story up. I really enjoyed a lot of the conversations happening in this book, particularly the Afrofuturism and grief. The story is set in a near-future version of Ghana where cities are entirely controlled and dependent on technology and AI. And Sankofa, the only character who can't interact with technology, is villainized for this. I think it speaks to a greater conversation of the tech takeover and the loss of humanity, and grief is woven throughout the entire story. Sankofa's grief feels so real because her emotions are concrete yet simplified. It doesn't take much to trigger her memories, and I think that's realistic for a lot of people. Sometimes it's the smallest things that bring a tidal wave of feelings, and I thought that was a highlight of this book. I did find the nature of the seed to be a bit confusing, but I did find out after I finished the book that despite Remote Control being separate from the Binti series, it is set in the same universe. So I wonder if my confusion about the seed stems from me just not understanding the world that this book is set in. I don't know if Robotown or LifeGen, an American pharmaceutical company, are from the Binti books, or if they're entirely unique to this book. I do know that Binti is also science fiction, but I don't know too much about it, so it's possible that there's a lot of crossover that I just don't know about. But I did have to reread the ending a couple of times because it felt like my brain just wasn't braining. But overall, I really liked this book. The ending is a bit ambiguous, but it definitely feels powerful to me. I gave Remote Control 4 stars. If you're looking for a grief-focused narrative, I would highly recommend this book. The second book I read was When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. This is one of those books that I saw once a few weeks ago, but now that I've read it, I keep seeing it everywhere. It keeps showing up in TikToks and Instagram Reels, and I don't know if the algorithm is listening or if everyone, including myself, collectively decided to read this all at the same time. It's also odd because this was a cover read. The cover design is really nice, and it is the primary reason that I picked this book up in the first place. This book follows a knight named Dimitir on a quest to find the mythological witch Baba Yaga. Along the way, he meets two others with curses of their own, Ala and Nico, and the three of them team up to make the journey together. Secrets plague this group of travelers, and they will have to confront which secrets need to be shared in order to get the task done. I know that Veronica Roth is incredibly well known from her Divergent series, but this is actually the very first book that I've ever read from her. I'm not a big dystopian fan, so I didn't really get into Divergent when it was popular, so a fantasy book was a little more appealing to me. But overall, I have pretty mixed feelings about this novella. Like I mentioned during Remote Control, I feel like novellas can easily run the risk of being too fast-paced, but I actually experienced the opposite problem with this book. I want to emphasize that I thought this book had a great first chapter. I thought it set Demeter up in a really interesting way, and I was curious about the quest he was about to go on. However, I don't think this book lived up to its prologue. The story went in a very different direction than I was anticipating, and I don't think that the story beats moved fast enough. I thought the characters spent a little too much time doing things that didn't seem to impact the outcome, and so as a result, I found the ending to wrap up a little quickly, but it wasn't too bad. I was also surprised that there was a romance in this book. I just didn't think that there would be enough time to establish a romance, and I think I was kind of right because despite the plot moving slowly, the romantic relationship goes from 0 to 100. I just don't find it very believable. It's not that I dislike the characters together, but I just don't buy this relationship considering the time they've spent together. I did like the magic in this book though. The story is set in Chicago, but it's rooted in Polish mythology. I've read the Witcher books by Andrzej Sapkowski, so I recognized a few of the creatures mentioned in this book, like the Striga. So I know that not everything in this book is original, but I think some of the ways Roth portrays these figures is interesting. For example, all of the monster-type characters can smell different emotions on people. So Zmoras can smell fear, Strigas can smell anger. I thought this was a fascinating idea, but I don't think it was utilized all that well in this book. I learned that there is a sequel coming out later this year, so it might become more relevant then, but I don't think it was all that important here. I used a sticker sheet from Rabbit Draw on Etsy for this spread. When I saw it online, it was a need. I also used a purple grid washi tape from Ikigai Papier, along with other washi tape and scrapbook paper from my local dollar store. I've also gotten a few questions about this yellow pen that I'm using. It's a Zebra Sarasa Gel Pen in 0.5 millimeters, and it comes in a vintage color set with 4 other pens, and I got mine on Amazon. My general thoughts on the characters are also pretty mixed. There wasn't anyone that I particularly latched onto. Some were a little more interesting than others because of their backstories, but some I thought were kind of forgettable. I will say, though, that there are some twists at the end of this book that impact each character, and those twists made each of them a lot more interesting. The new revelations and reactions all work for the characters' benefit. I'm still not sure if I'll pick up the sequel when it comes out. I didn't love this book, but it did end off on an interesting note, and I'm a little curious to see where it goes. I guess I'll see how far back I am in my series goal before I decide. I gave When Among Crows 3.5 stars. It was just okay, but I'm still allowed to like the cover. The last thing I read in May was actually a short story called A Martian Odyssey by Stanley G. Weinbaum. In my efforts to read more sci-fi, I remembered that I have this collection of 9 sci-fi stories from Word Cloud Classics. I think the genre of sci-fi is a little ambiguous with some of the selections because there's an Edgar Allan Poe story in it, as well as a book by Lovecraft, but some of them are unquestionably sci-fi, and that's how I came to reading this story. I had never heard of it before I started reading it, but apparently it's considered an important piece in the history of the science fiction novel. A Martian Odyssey is about an astronaut and chemist named Dick Jarvis on the first ever expedition to Mars. He and 3 other crew members successfully arrive on Mars, but when Jarvis travels 800 miles out to survey the land, his ship crashes and he becomes stranded on Mars with nothing but a survival suit and a water pack. He quickly encounters a strange bird-like creature that he names Tweel, and the 2 of them team up and begin the journey back to the expedition base. The best way I think I can describe this story is that it's very kooky. There's a lot of imagination in this story, and Weinbaum really brings Mars to life in an interesting way. His vision of Mars has both natural life and mechanical life, which I think is quite different. But this is a story that really embraces creativity and fun, and I think this is best shown through the character of Tweel. Tweel isn't exactly a bird, but he's described as looking a bit like an ostrich with a kangaroo pouch on his belly. This story was published in 1934, and according to the internet, Tweel is the first non-anthropomorphic thinking creature to be featured in American science fiction. Apparently, Tweel became a very big influence on how aliens would go on to be depicted. He knows very little English, yet he manages to communicate with Jarvis in his own unique ways. He also moves around in this really cool way. He can jump like 70 feet in the air and land on his beak. It's very clear that Tweel is an extraordinarily intelligent being, but I think his existence on Mars makes for a good separation. I also think Jarvis is quite entertaining. The story is framed in the present, with the 3 other crew members having just rescued Jarvis on Mars, and it's Jarvis telling them all the things that happened while he was alone. He has some really funny quips with the crew members, and I think he's a really likable character. The only flaw I would say that he has is that he has no flaws. He always seems to decipher exactly what Tweel is trying to say to him, and he always manages to solve the problems he encounters. He also remains extremely calm when his ship crashes. He's so relaxed and just decides to start walking the 800 miles. Could not be me. I think I would have liked to see him make a mistake or two, because I think it would have made his successes feel more earned. I decorated this page with a Nature Witch sticker sheet from Astray on Etsy. I also used some green scrapbook paper and washi tape from Amazon. I think the format of this book does feel a little bit outdated. It's mostly Jarvis giving a giant monologue of what happened, jumping from moment to moment, with the others cutting in occasionally to ask questions or give answers to Jarvis's questions. It works for this story, but it's not a format that you see very often anymore. Regardless, I really enjoyed this story. It was fun and entertaining, and I liked it. I gave A Martian Odyssey 4 stars. I haven't read The Martian yet, but I feel like it would be a really good follow-up to this story. And that is it for my May wrap-up. I'm still shocked that I managed to read anything, let alone 3 stories this month, but I'm happy that I pushed myself to read them because May was a good reading month. I have a few anticipated releases happening in June, so hopefully I can find time to at least start them in June. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.